Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real. I am excited to introduce to you a really new friend, Coby. This is like in the last 6 weeks, I think I've gotten to know you. So, I can't even say your name right. That's how new it is. Coby Milne is a co-founder of a company called Roman 3, which we're going to talk about in a second. But the weird thing, Coby, about this is almost never reply to a LinkedIn message. I mean, we can talk about how we connected there. It was really random.
Yeah.
But it turns out what you do at your company is exactly what I've been looking for probably my whole career. And so random coincidence, if we look at the word coincident, it just means happening at the same time. It doesn't mean it's random. So we met and we connected, and we are going to be working on a project together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Coby is a friend of mine from Canada
Mm-hmm.
in the Atlantic time zone, which I didn't even know really existed. I thought Eastern was as far as we go, but you're actually 2 hours ahead of me in Central time zone. So Coby, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's funny. Most like we've been building relationships in the US this year. It's been a priority for us. And that's one thing that we do find is that people are like, there's another time zone after Eastern. And then what's really funny is because again, we're in Nova Scotia, but there's also a time zone past the Atlantic time zone, which is the Newfoundland time zone, which is half an hour later
Oh,
than
get
ours.
out of here.
For
How do they
just for
on the
just
half
Newfoundland.
hour?
Yeah, the half hour. Yeah.
Oh, that's freaky.
So people get so just the casual conversations turn into a pretty interesting geography conversation and
Right.
education, just kind of getting to know a little bit about us. Um,
For sure.
but yes, I randomly reached out to you over LinkedIn, which is something that I've kind of gotten really used to doing. So because my team Roman 3, we have a few things on the go, and we're really bad at the traditional approaches to like sales and funnels and stuff like that. So we just kind of try to make a human connection through the inhuman platforms in hopes to kind of meeting some cool people around, like, around our podcast and some of the work that we do, because we like to think that we're weird in how we do our work. And sometimes people that, or sometimes I think that the uniqueness and hopefully the sincerity of us really wanting to build kind of collaborations comes across in kind of the spammy type messages that we send out when we're trying to just, like, get to know people. Because part of the reason why we started doing it was we had a lot of professionals. We had a very good network pre-COVID. Mostly it was in the Atlantic Canadian region, which is where we did a lot of our work kind of before COVID. And then kind of once COVID hit, everybody that we knew worked somewhere else and did something else. And so the connections were lost. Like, when people just left, we don't have email contacts anymore. So we're like, well, guess we got to build a new network. So we're like, well, why not go international? There's no harm in us. It's easy. It's as easy for us to get to know someone the next town over as 3 time zones away. So we thought, you know what, we just need to start building our new network, and we just kind of did it one reach out at a time.
Wow. And it worked.
Yeah.
So I remember, I don't know why I responded, to be honest, really, I don't. But I said to you when we talked on Zoom the first time, I said, I don't want to be sold anything, Coby. I think I was really adamant about that. I said, I want to have a conversation. And you're like, well, I'm going to tell you about my product, but it doesn't mean you have to buy it or something like that. And it felt like a really genuine person-to-person conversation from the very beginning. And then I was listening in a new way to what you were telling me about your product, your software. And it's what like I said earlier, it's what I have been missing in the work I do, which some of you who have been listening to this podcast for a while know that I'm a coach and consultant in squishy areas like leadership, communication, the things that are hard to measure.
Yeah.
And for you, I don't think I told you this, Coby, but the last job I had before I started my company was where my boss told me, I was a leadership consultant in a manufacturing organization. My boss told me one day, Jody, what you do is touchy-feely crap that makes me puke. Quote.
Right.
And that was how I was like, my whole life was about making relationships and doing things that are squishy. And here it was just discounted in one comment. So I've always been looking for ways to measure those squishy things. And that's what you guys do.
Yeah. And I mean, we are, like I say, we're a bit weird because we try to find a new way to look at the concepts that, yeah, the squishy concepts that have always been hard for people to nail down. And how we kind of came to specialize in that area really has to do with the fact that both my business partner and I, the co-founder of Roman 3, we come from an economic development background. So he worked as a business coach and senior economic development officer, kind of working on regional economic projects in our region. And I was a workforce specialist and consultant and trainer that focused on growing the workforce from an economic perspective. So the thing about what most people don't realize about economic development is if you do a really good job with it, nobody knows who you are. You are you are moving things behind the scenes. You are helping like municipalities and towns and counties kind of pull together their resources for if someone comes looking for a new property, that you've got the process streamlined for them so that they can easily do it. They don't have to call this person and that person and find out that the farmer's nephew that owns a property and he doesn't know if he wants to sell. Like you do a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. And so and in our region especially, it's a very political position to work in economic development because it's funded by municipalities, by the province, by the federal government. So you have a lot of masters and a lot of people that you have to appease. So how we kind of found success in both of our roles, we kind of our atmosphere, we circled each other kind of our orbits for a long time. So we always kind of bounce ideas off each other even before we actually were working together. And one of the ways that we did that was we need to be able to stand in front of microphones and justify the work that we do and how we're spending our time and our dollars. So we're like, well, we need to be really good at measuring. And one of the ways that we do that is we talk about the difference between contribute and attribute. Because when you're talking economic development, like, you'll like the mayor of a city will say, well, how is your entity, how is your organization improve the GDP of our community? And I'd be like, I can't speak to that because we play a role in that, but we're not the ones hiring. We're not the ones that are shipping into new products. We're not the ones that are establishing the minimum wage, but we contribute to those pieces. We play a part of it, but you can't hold us accountable to stuff that we only contribute to. So we would say you have to hold us accountable to what can be attributed to us. So for example, if a municipality sells kind of crown land to a big company, we will play a part in that, but that sale is not ours to own. Right. But if we build the package, the foreign investment package, and make it really easy to find, that you can hold us to, you can measure us on that, because you contribute that being there to us, but then that being there contributes to that land being sold. So thinking about things from those perspectives allowed us to find ways to justify the work that we did and the growth that we had and the success that we had, because we're held to things that we can control and we're not held to things that we can't. So when we started Roman 3, we decided to move away from the big economic development. I mean, we still do economic development, community projects. Like, that was a big part of what we did pre-COVID. But when COVID hit, we had to start Roman 3 up from scratch again. And we decided to move more into the organizational development side, because what we learned when we were doing all these economic projects around, helping manufacturers with continuous improvement or tourism expansion or those kind of things, a lot of the hurdles that these organizations ran into was the fact that the senior leadership, the C-suite, was really keen on this new, lean program, but no one else cared. So the employees were totally disengaged. So we thought, hey, let's work on an engagement as, helping improve employee engagement, employee motivation, as the things that you can be attributed to help contribute towards the success of these programs. And when we did that, we realized that a lot of organizations weren't ready for that. So we decided to kind of take a step back and figure out what needed to exist first. And then we realized it had to be inclusion, it had to be acceptance, and kind of that sense of belonging needed to be there for people to feel a part of the company so they could engage, so they could give their best work. And then we realized that, we did some work around that, but it was never as successful as we wanted it to be, because then we realized we had to take a step back further and say what has to exist for inclusion to work. And it was psychological safety. We had to have psychological safety for people to be able to speak up, share their thoughts and ideas without fear of retaliation or ridicule. So we started doing some work around that, and that was helpful, but it never really took off the way we wanted to. So then we realized that we had to resolve the core issues, which was workplaces not meeting employee expectations, not providing sufficient pay, sufficient job security, equitable treatment, consistency, those kinds of things. So, and what we realized in this whole journey, as and this is over a course of a couple of years, that we'd fallen down Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we had to build this framework that is the core work we do at Roman 3 around, resolving job dissatisfaction, creating psychological safety, building inclusion, engagement, and striving for success. And that's the model we use to build our measurement tools, to build our solutions, our diagnostics, our training programs, to help create that systematic approach to building your way up. And so part of it is realizing you have to know what you can be attributed to your efforts and how that contributes to the larger picture, so what we will measure will actually make a difference.
That's so good. That's so good. Everything you're saying is in the back of my mind. I wished was there somewhere, but I was never the one to do it. I always thought, oh man, I wish there were a way to measure these things. What you just described is kind of reverse engineering the process from whichever problem it was, and then going back. And you do have a pyramid, a triangle on, that's how you set things up for you. So you have to work with the bottom first to get to the top. So everything that I've noticed from your website and learned from talking to you, Coby, makes me excited to work with you to take what I do, which is, I don't know, the touchy-feely crap that makes people do the front-facing things, right? So I'm a coach and I'm a speaker and I'm the one who's in front of the people, but back behind what's really going on, it's like behind the curtain, all of the magic that happens is what you do with the diagnostics and the numbers and all that stuff. So I'm really excited about that. Can you describe, let's, before we get to the specifics of Roman 3, where'd you come from? What's your background?
Cool. Yeah. So I kind of got the journey that I took is a very uncommon journey. So I was, I went to university right out of high school to be a teacher, because that's what you do. My mom's a teacher, and that's just kind of the normal thing that you do. But I realized that when I was at university that I didn't like any of the subjects I taught in school. So what I liked was learning itself. So what I ended up studying was psychology, cognitive psychology, and educational psychology. And that was the stuff that really interested me. Because it was funny, because I was not a good student in high school. Like, I got through by on charisma and persuasion. Because I was the kind of kid that would tell my teacher that he lost my paper. Clearly I passed it in, and I would recount the story of how I passed in and how he wasn't paying attention. So where's my paper? And I really didn't do it.
Wow.
But
creative though.
Well, again, I worked very hard to not work. That was the kind of kid that I was. But when I got into psychology and cognition, I just it all clicked for me. And I'm like, this is the stuff that part of my persuasion and charisma tactics were actually just cognitive and psychological aspects that I just naturally kind of embodied. So learning about this stuff and learning about all the kind of things of the human mind and everything like that was so interesting to me that I decided I didn't want to be a teacher. I wanted to work in psychology in some way. So I decided to go to grad school instead of going to teachers college, and I ended up deciding to take adult education as my graduate program. because it was a really talk about something that's squishy. Adult education was a really squishy subject where you could really kind of do whatever you wanted. So I did it from a cognitive psychology perspective. And what interested me was how the human mind and how the skills that we have, like the soft skills, I hate that term, but the idea of it,
Essential skills.
essential skill, no, that's just it. The essential skills, how fundamental those are. So, but they're also impossible to teach, was what the concept was. So I'm like, well, I'll figure it out. I'll figure out how to teach essential skills. So I specialized in doing my research around workforce training entities and organizations and nonprofits, and built content and resources to improve the cognitive skills that are the essential skills, like critical thinking, problem solving, assertiveness, efficacy, those kinds of things. Then from there I started working in community education, to do to build workforce programs that taught those kind of the employability skills, but also the essential cognitive skills. And I ended up running some pilots because I did everything very, very differently. So the province took note of my approach when I started doing these small projects, and gave me big extensions and newer scopes of work, because I was able to draw the difference between job ready, meaning that the person could physically and have the capacity to hold down a job, and being employable, actually having the skills that allow them to get past their 3-month probationary period.
Right.
And I focused on employable as my metrics, as opposed to job ready. And so I had incredible stats and responses and reviews, and built new pilots for the province here, left, right, and center. And what was funny was, when I started doing this, I never actually had a real job. I never had a salaried permanent position. I always jumped contract to contract, and built this reputation as this, expert in workforce needs and skill development. So then that kind of led me to do some work as an interim executive and project manager. So I would go into organizations, build projects for them, usually around the workforce and education training sort of stuff. And that's what kind of led me into economic development. And then I, had a entity that I was on the board of, that their CEO stepped down. So they asked me to step in as the interim CEO. And did that. And that's what got me into full on economic development. And then from there, I kind of bounced around, taking on, fractional and interim leadership positions at municipalities and stuff like that. And then that kind of naturally turned into forming Roman 3. My business partner joined me. And that's kind of what led me to where I am now.
That's awesome. I love that. I love how, even when you were younger, when you didn't like the way education was being offered to you, even though your mom was a teacher, I think that's similar to me. My mom was a teacher as well. And I learned this term a couple of years ago called enforced or imposed learning.
Right.
And that's when I realized that's what I've kind of resisted, even though I'm very fascinated with the whole learning process. But like you, there wasn't a lot that I found valuable in the rote,
Right.
classes. And you study for the test. I studied for tests, and I was good at taking tests, but I never really learned anything.
Right. Yeah.
And so if we're talking about now taking all of these ways of being into a workplace where people now can be treated as humans and not just as resources, that's what I see in the conversations you and I have had, so that there can be less about recruiting and retention and more about attracting and engaging, is how I'm looking at it. So the overall term for all of this, I guess, Coby, is culture, right? The culture of an organization, which is again another squishy term.
Yeah.
What is culture? And so how would you define culture in the work you're doing now?
Yeah. So culture is, the way that we talk about it, it really is the environment and the expectations that are placed on employees, and including managers and even leadership, to that is what enables productivity and profitability. And it's the idea of, like, when we talk to senior leadership about culture, warm and fuzzies is the term that we often hear, right? It's like, we don't hear squishy.
Touchy-feely, warm and fuzzy. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So part of what we try and do, and even the work that, a lot of the content that we create for, with our podcast, our YouTube channel, and our articles, something like that, is around trying to make culture as firm as accounting. We want HR and culture professionals to be as influential and as tangible as the finance teams, because businesses are built on people. And what's funny is, like, so we have a webinar that we given a number of times, that it's one I really like, but we talk about the fact that when workplaces talk about culture as being warm and fuzzies, we kind of say, well, the problem with that is that, your HR costs, like your staffing costs, are likely between 50% and 75% of your total expenses. And you are not maintaining them. But I'm sure you have at least one piece of equipment that costs 5 to 10% of your overall revenue, that you probably have maintenance schedules for and backup pieces for, and you're running diagnostics on a regular basis. And you really, because you see that as an asset. Mm. And you see the employees, which are, again, 50 to 75% of your entire expenses, as a liability. And this is why we don't think about, we think of culture as warm and fuzzies, because we think about employees, because we don't own them, as as liabilities and expenses, and equipment as assets that we need to keep maintaining investment. So trying to challenge that idea is the first step in the transformation that needs to happen if we're going to actually really tie culture to organizational efficiency and profitability.
So is this what you did before COVID as well, or did it get more focused after COVID?
So we always talked about this idea pre-COVID, because this was the approach that we took in our own work. Because again, my business partner worked with businesses and organizations and trying to optimize employee retention and attraction. And part of it was, he would say, you can't keep giving them the absolute minimum and then questioning why they give you no loyalty. So part of it was a lot of him trying to say, there's this big problem of, employees are a necessary evil in a lot of these small business owners' minds. And that's the fundamental thing that he had to break. And so part of it was to try and articulate how I would work with on the employee side, helping them be able to articulate how their role, again, can be what you can attribute to them contributes to the larger organizational success. And he was trying to do the same thing on the employer side. So this was always a part of what we did, and this is what we wanted Roman 3 to be. Well, we're hoping by 2025 this was going to be where the evolution was going to take us to this being our main thing. But then when COVID hit and all our community innovation projects, economic development projects died, we're like, well, we have to do something. So we just jump started it and really focused on it and building new content, assets, and resources. But where our plan was to slow play it, but it was something that was always a fundamental part of how we talked about the relationship between kind of employee and employer.
That's kind of interesting. You said we plan to slow play it. We kind of do, right? It's the less risky path when we slow play things, because then we can be like, oh, I can adjust. And sometimes the universe steps in and says, guess what? There's another way we're going to do this. And that's what COVID did for a lot of us. There were benefits to it in weird ways, if we think back on it. This might be one of them. Kind of sped up the need. And I recognized, as probably a lot of consultants did during that time, that we have to do something different, because everything dried up. Then what do we do? The reinvention space of that, the possibility space of that, is a mindset. And it would have been really easy for many people, maybe did, to go down a different path when things are beyond our control and throw in the towel. So I'm really grateful that you did what you did. So can you tell me a little bit about the name Roman 3?
Sure. So we get the question a lot, and it's, people wonder, is it a scripture thing? Is it, like, where does it come from? Honestly, it's just that my business partner James and I, we're just geeks, and it's a play on the Roman numeral 3, because we say our focus is inspiration, innovation, and implementation. So 3 I's.
Mhm.
So three eyes is a Roman numeral 3. So that's where Roman 3 comes from. It's like no more thought of we were in the early stages of because I formed out of my own before he joined me, and I was like, oh, I need a company's name, and he was just like, well, what should you call it? And I was like, well, what do you want to focus on? So we kind of throw around those a bunch of the words, and I was actually, those are the three things we're going to be. And I was like, the three eyes, I like the Roman numeral.
Mhm.
So I was like, how about Roman 3? He goes, fine, we'll use that for now. and
That's
then
awesome.
and then it just stuck. So
That's awesome. Well, it's funny because I have my own version of the three eyes
yeah,
when I'm talking about discernment. So I'm helping me as well as my coaching clients to get to making better decisions. And so I talk about discern before you decide.
right.
And I call it line up the eyes, which is your intellect, your intuition, and your instinct, your
Right.
head brain, your heart brain, and your gut brain. And if we can
Mhm.
line up the eyes, we have a better opportunity to make better decisions. So it's very
Yeah,
fitting that we would
absolutely.
come together in what we're up to. So there's just a lot of synergy, Coby, that I'm really excited to bring. We're working together with one of my clients. This will come out in a couple of weeks. Our conversation that we're having today
Yeah.
will come out as a podcast in a couple of weeks. So this afternoon, I will be signing that contract.
Oh, great.
So, right. So we'll be going forward with that. And there's just something about, let's just use the word synergy, something
Yeah.
about coincidence, something about happenstance, that has, I'm going to say, sort of a spiritual dimension, the
Mhm.
law of attraction, whatever, all this stuff that you can't really touch, but you can definitely feel,
Yeah.
is what I kind of got from you when we first met too. So there's something about squishiness, warm and fuzzies, that is crucial
Mhm.
to moving in not even a different direction, in a deeper direction, I think.
Right. Yeah.
And
So, well, it's funny because again, like I definitely am a little more left brain concrete thinking. So I definitely acknowledge the un the unknowable that tends to be the happenstance of connection and the squishiness. But you know how I process it is I process it as good luck is nothing more than timing.
okay.
And that, because I believe luck exists. I try not to because it's not a concrete thing, but eventually you just have to accept that things happen. But I mean, when it comes to even with business, you can have the best business plan, the best backers, the best product, but if your timing is off, your business fails.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look back at kind of what we think about with luck, it really kind of falls into timing. So I just think that, we had the good luck that we connected at the right time. And that's what made the connection, that I had this reach out piece and your name came up at the time that, you kind of were open to, even if it was like the feeling you had when you read my message was a positive feeling. Sure, I'll give this rando a shot. Whereas if you spilled your coffee on yourself, people are like, no, I'm mad at everybody and go away,
Right.
rando. So I mean, so it could just be as simple as that. But that's the way that I process it. But I mean, it is something that you have to acknowledge. Like for me, I always say you can, the only thing you can't control is timing,
Mm.
and that's the piece that I think where alignments happen, and you just end up having good luck because you have good timing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would go a little more right brained. So
Yeah,
that's the beauty, right? That's
yeah,
the
exactly.
beauty of this, because I welcome, value, um appreciate, need more left brain in my life, right? So
Mhm.
the combination that I've sensed with you, and we'll see for this next year with this contract, how it plays out. But I think the way we started this relationship was very real,
Yeah.
very honest, very authentic, and I think that's what I'm really excited about going forward. So Coby, tell me about what's happened in the last 3 years since you've sort of taken this different approach, or this deeper
Mhm.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of. What are you seeing? What are some of the results that your clients are experiencing?
So what we see a lot of is we see a lot of people come to the realization that things are not as good as they thought they are.
Mm.
So one of the products that we have is we have a 3-day certification program that we call Workplace Culture Intelligence, where we've built risk assessments that we train people managers and HR professionals to use in their workplaces. And it allows, and so there's a risk assessment for our compliance stage where we address the job dissatisfaction and complying with employee expectations, one for psychological safety, one for inclusion, and one for engagement. And we teach them how to use the tools and kind of the fundamental theories behind it. And what we find is people really think that, oh yeah, things are good. Again, we're probably great at the compliance stage and resolving job dissatisfaction. Psychological safety, it might not be ideal, but it's probably pretty good. But then it's probably inclusions where we drop off. But then everybody comes to realize where they're really blowing it is at that bottom stage.
Wow.
And so we talk about kind of what the shared realization that kind of happened from COVID is I use what I call the boiling frog analogy to say that, like you put a frog in temperate water and turn up the heat, eventually the water can boil and the frog can survive. But if you put the frog into boiling water, it'll try and get out, right? So the idea is that we as a society for the past 20, 30 years have been sitting in water that slowly had the heat turned up, longer shifts, larger wage disparity, more stress and more expectations, and companies taking advantage of of employees and by things like squashing unionizations and those types of things. And when 2020 hit, we were already at a boiling point. But then when we all were forced to work from home, we were all pulled out of the water. And then once the things got to the point where we could go back to work, the workplaces wanted to put the frogs back in the water, but the frogs had cooled down and no one wanted to go back in because the water was not turned down. Right. So what we have to do now is we have to turn the water down if you want people to actually not, we want people actually not just survive in the water, but thrive in the water. And so the way that we talk about that base level is where most of the heavy lifting needs to happen. And what we say is that what the workplace or what the workforce expects now are 3 things. They expect the factors of the workplace like wages and job security and wellness and consistency and all those kinds of things to be competitive with other businesses in their sector or region, sufficient to meet employee needs and to actually serve their function, and to be equitable and fairly applied. And that most workplaces are really good at competitive. They know, okay, our competition for our labor market or our competition in general offers X, Y, and Z, so we'll offer comparable. And they're usually pretty good at that, but that's usually where the effort stops. And when you have a unionized workplace, a lot of them focus on the equity side too, because the whole point of collective agreements is to improve equity. But where almost everyone kind of blows it is sufficiency. And if you're competitive, but you're not sufficient, then you're as good as everyone else, but everyone else is terrible. If you're equitable and you're not sufficient, then you're equally treating everybody terribly. So a lot of the work that we try and do is to have people realize that we say there's 7 factors of the workplace, and they have to meet the expectations of competitive, sufficient, and equitable, or we call it the 7x3 rule. And that's one of the fundamental things you have to understand, because that not meeting expectations is why you have the turnover levels, why you have people who are just quiet quitting or putting in the minimum amount of effort, or why your employer brand is terrible. And that's the first place you have to start, where people think they have to start at engagement, but honestly, you need to start way lower, because that's probably where your biggest hole is.
So that makes so much sense when you describe it the way you describe it, especially the boiling water piece. Why would the frog want to come back to the boiling water? It doesn't make any sense. So what is the tipping point at which a client or potential client says, yes, we do need to do this? Because I think that's always been a challenge I've had. I can see the future for you if you continue on this road, and it's probably going to look a lot like it does today. I can also see the possibility, but I don't know how to sell that. So How do you sell that?
So it is a tough thing to sell, especially if the senior leadership have already made up their minds that employees are expenses and why would we invest in dump more into the investment. So one of the ways that we talk about this, because like part of what we provide in our training and certification with HR professionals and managers is we say you need to not just have the answers, you need to be able to sell the answers. So we say the two things you have to focus on are the business case and the emotional case, like the stress case. What's keeping them up at night? What are the pain points they want relieved? Now, when we talk about the business case, we have a concept that we use, we call labor value loss, where we use statistics and to identify a common problem in the workplace, like turnover, disengagement, burnout, workplace instability, those kinds of things, as the problems have a cost to a percentage of employee salary. So like there's a study done by people from Gallup. We have an older study, but it's a well-regarded study that said that a disengaged employee costs 34% of their salary is lost due to productivity loss, customer loss, just work slowdowns, all everything else. So a disengaged employee is costing you money. And that's one employee is costing 34% of their salary. So a $100,000 employee is costing you $34,000 a year by being disengaged. So we say the labor value loss is that 34% per employee. So if you've got 10 employees, that's 300 grand that you're just losing by having them be disengaged.
Mm-hmm.
So you're already spending this money. If you spend a fraction of that money on resolving it, the ROI is going to be significant. So we talk about it in terms of that labor value loss. We have like 8 or 9 concepts that we use. We have a free course on our training portal where we actually give you 5 examples of labor value loss and a little calculator tool that helps people figure out kind of what is labor value loss in my workplace by how many employees, like what's their salary range, those sort of things to kind of give you an understanding to help articulate that. Mm-hmm. And we say to consultants and we say to even internal people that want to make the change, that business case is going to be essential for them to say, why should I steer money away from things that are making me money into things that are already costing me money? Right. We'll say, so we try and make that case. But also, what are the things that are keeping you up at night? Because again, if you can't keep there enough people, if you're paying crazy amounts in overtime because of absence or burnout, these are all the financial things that are probably affecting you from the business case, but they're also weighing on you. Yeah. The things that you can't figure out how to solve, but it's because you're trying to tackle the pain point. You're not actually trying to resolve the root cause. And so what we can help you is to say, like one example that we talk about is we had one business that we work with that was burning through, like they would lose like 40% of their new employees within the last 6 months. So they thought the problem was they were hiring the wrong people. We're not looking internally at the retention issues to say, no, you're not onboarding them. You're not actually, giving them, you're not meeting competitive, sufficient, and equitable when it comes to job security and wages and wellness and those kinds of things, physical environment. So it's about saying it's not just the stress that you're feeling. Those are the symptoms. We want to actually help you resolve the sickness, the root cause. So that conversation of the pain points from the stress, kind of the stress keeping you up at night case, and the business case of how you're already losing this money, why not reinvest it and stop putting good money after bad? Then those tend to be, by combination, usually opens up a dialogue and it lets you kind of get to the heart of how you can actually help them.
That's so good. Gets to the root cause. I love that you said that. It's a term that when in my work in manufacturing is very understandable to people who are doing process type work. So there's so much that we can unpack here. What are the results? Do you have case studies? Like, are you seeing things now?
So one thing that we do, we don't work with enough businesses directly for the long period of time to really be able to show kind of the results. A lot of the work that we do some, and a lot of it is kind of instituting, because like part of the problem is in Canada, the projects tend to be not as long as they should be, because like, well, help us resolve the symptom and then we don't need you anymore. Like, well, no, you do need us, but we'll do what you ask, but that's not going to really help you. Yeah. So part of it is that we've shifted to more towards helping organizations that are that to kind of help empower their teams to build capacity to resolve a lot of their issues. So
Okay.
like we have, so like whether it's through our certification around our workplace culture intelligence, or through some of our change management certification, where we focus on the people side of change, those types of pieces tend to be where a lot of the work that we do happens. But again, these are often bigger, longer term concepts, so that take a while to actually kind of take off. But the work that but the small examples of projects that actually have finished and actually met their scope, we have noticed that part of the transformation that needs to happen is really getting the mindsets to be changed. Okay, this, this is a problem that we've been missing the root cause. Or, okay, I do understand how having this stuff laid out will make a difference. Or, oh, if we do this, our employer brand will improve. So now we can actually not, or now we actually can rely on things like the benefits of employee referrals, or the idea of doing continuous intakes to allow for people to fill vacancies and not just have to do this mass hiring and hope the right people apply. Sometimes it's a matter of kind of helping businesses take things a little bit differently. But again, especially when we're working with small businesses, a lot of the biggest problem is they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
So any real improvement tends to have a good effect. But we do find that the results tend to be, when we're looking at where the root causes are, they don't have it as good as they think they do. And provided they're willing to accept that they need the help, they will see significant improvements just by doing a lot of the basic stuff, because it's a pretty low bar for a lot of organizations. And one thing that's really funny is we talk about our prediction. We did an episode of our podcast, what we're going to predicting for this year. And we said that the bar is really low. We call it the amazing race to the bottom, where everyone's focusing on competitiveness. So they're saying, well, I don't need to raise my wages any more than my competition does. But we say, so everyone is jockeying for position at the bottom of the barrel. But those companies that just make that little extra effort to make their programs again more sufficient, or to train their middle managers to improve psychological safety and belonging, they're going to see a huge competitive advantage by small efforts because the bar is so low.
Yeah, so good. Boy, there's a lot we can do. We're gonna come back to this, Coby, in 6 months or so, because we're gonna be starting this project together in January, which I look forward to having measurable results for my client, because I'm going to be doing the things I've always been doing. It's just that now I'm going to be doing them with a way to measure, with some assessment tools, and with some ways to show them some different results, which I'm really excited about. So if you were looking for specific clients for your work, would it be at the HR level, or would it be at the C-suite level? Where do you hope?
Well, so it really depends on the size of the entity, right? Because if it's a business that has like under 40 employees, they tend to often not even have an HR professional. So absolutely, the decision maker C-suite tends to be a great point to work on, because and part of it might be allowing to move the HR responsibilities off the side of the desk of people and kind of coordinate that into a bit of a piece. Sometimes that shift happens, but yeah, we do find that it's the best person to talk to us are the decision makers. So whether that's a CHRO or chief people officer, or a COO, if there's not necessarily that internal operations kind of team where HR, because sometimes HR is just an admin position.
Yeah.
So those people unfortunately don't have the authority to actually make any difference. So it's who's gonna be able to stand up in front of the organization and say, we're gonna do this because you matter as employees and our long-term success matters. So we're going to try to be more intentional, more strategic, and to make the connection between employee performance and organizational performance clear and profound. Whoever that person is, that's the person that we should be talking to.
Nice. So you have a lot of learning resources on your own website. You have a lot of evergreen courses. You have a lot of things that people can have access to. Is it a membership then in that way?
No, so like we have courses on our main website, roman3.ca. On our resources section, we have access to our training portal, which is called Roman 3 Academy. There we have courses ranging from 15 minutes for like $25 to like 6 hours for like $400. And there's also a lot of free resources on there. We have our knowledge suite with full of articles and video episodes of our podcast, infographics, and then we have a free course on labor value loss to kind of help organizations start to think about the costs of their staffing issues and how they could stop the bleeding to actually start to improve their profitability and their performance. Plus, we have our own podcast that where we talk about a lot of these issues. Our episode that launched in end of October was about labor value loss and ideas around the cause of burnout and incivility, sexual harassment, how these actually really add up over time. And we have a YouTube channel full of little videos. Like we have a video that talks about contribute versus attribute, inclusion versus integration, nice versus kind, those kinds of things, plus videos of our podcast. So we have a lot of content because our real thing is we do a lot of content marketing because we're not really good at sales. I'm not a very good salesperson, but I'm a good relationship builder and a good explainer of ideas.
Yeah.
So that tends to be kind of our approach to building our networks. But we do that by providing a lot of content that we hope is really accessible and can really help change the narrative for many people.
That's great. So there's no reason anybody listening to not learn something from Roman 3 and Coby and James, his partner. So Roman 3, ROMAN number 3.ca is where you can go to learn more about James and Coby. They're right there on the website. You can look at about, you can, or if you're in Canada, you say about. I love that. I'm in North Dakota. I'm really close to your country. Right. So I love this. And it feels like, I love that you said nice and kind, because we often, Canadians and Minnesotans, North Dakotans, don't understand that distinction. Absolutely. And that's a really big one. So Coby, I'm looking forward to whatever's going to happen in the next year with our partnership here. And I hope that anybody who wants more information will reach out to you. Is that the best way, to just go to your website and find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Coby Milne on LinkedIn. And I'm always happy to chat with people there too. We get a lot of requests for podcast topics and questions and stuff like that. So we're always happy to engage. We're pretty easy to talk to. Oh, and we always make time to respond to people when they reach out with kind of random thoughts and questions, because that's how some of the best conversations start.
Absolutely. And may I just point out that I have been pronouncing your last name wrong the whole time because we haven't used last names. Right. And it's Milne. And I said Milne because it's Milne. So here we go. That's what's cool when you get to know somebody first name to first name. Right. Last name, who cares? It's the relationship that leads to the transaction. I love it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being with me today, Coby. Well, the next one will be, let's schedule it now for 6 months from now, and we'll report our progress.
Sounds great.
In Canada, our progress.
All right, thanks, Jody.
Yep, and thanks everybody for listening. As always, get real. Talk to you again. Okay, I'm gonna hit stop record. Boom.